first got together, as I was walking home, he started texting me while walking behind me, which I thought was weird, but, maybe he was shy, He talked to me the next day, and we just ended up clicking and being friends for a while, and then ended up being a couple. When I very first met Brian, he was charming. He was super charming. All of these gifts, and, he treated me like I was a princess. It was always an adventure, you know what I mean? And I think that's what I loved about him and what drew me to him. He was adventurous. And to me, at first, he was always that happy-go-getty person, and I loved the energy that he put off. It wasn't like any other guy I had met before. We were walking home from school one day, and my phone went off. Brian had looked over, and he saw that it was a dude.
Who are you talking to?
And he went through my phone, and I guess did not like what he saw. It was literally just a friend. And he got angry. And when I looked in his eyes, his character and everything, his soul was almost not there. Like he flipped a switch and he just turned it off. So he went ahead and squeezed my arm so hard that he left bruises. I didn't really know how to react. It was just kind of a numb feeling that I felt. He just wasn't the same person that I knew. He told me I wasn't allowed to speak to other guys at school. I wasn't allowed to text other guys, nothing.
I don't want you talking to anyone else.
So eventually he controlled pretty much what I wore. If I wore different things that he didn't like, he would punish me for that. He pretty much controlled everything that I did, even in high school. He always apologized. He would bring me flowers and bring me stuff to school and buy me books and buy me things I liked just to try to apologize or make up for it. But, there's not really an apology for that. It broke my heart, but honestly, I would always feel bad because, I do love him. I think that I always wanted to feel loved and I always wanted to be treated the way that I treated him, if that makes sense. He was convinced all the time that I was dating or talking to other guys. He was very, very insecure, and he never ever believed me. The physical abuse got worse instantly. He would hit me, he would throw things at me, he would scream at me at the top of his lungs, and it was over little stuff. Once the abuse started, it felt normal to me. You don't feel anything, and you just kind of it's just part of the day. You just do it to keep going. He became a person I was scared of and a person I was completely frightened of every single day. Eventually, people start to notice. I had a teacher pull me aside, and he said, I don't think this looks right. The way he treats you isn't right. The way he's just grabbed you isn't right. Brian had beaten me the night before over something so stupid, and I had bruises all over my legs. He had noticed and said something about it. I was embarrassed, but I protected him and I lied, And those teachers, they just let it go, and I really wish they would have just reported it or done something about it. Brian slowly stopped being the really excited, unpredictable person that I loved and started being the person that he was. I wasn't ever an assertive person. I've always kind of been a shy, quiet, let's keep the peace kind of person. So if I can keep the peace in any way, I'll do that. One day, Brian was at my house and I saw his phone and it lit up a girl's name. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and look at it. She was like, what time are we hanging out later? And I was instantly upset because I put up with so much that being betrayed by him giving some other female attention, I mean, it was just heartbreaking and wrecking to me. I took a picture with my phone. I was way too scared of him, so I didn't say anything to him. I waited till we went home. I texted him about it. The text said, I saw what the girl said to you. I know you have plans later to hang out with her. I took a picture with my phone. I have hard evidence. No, you can't delete it or deny it. I told him, I'm done. I don't want to do this for real. Like, please leave me alone. It felt empowering to be able to tell him, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this with you. Like, I don't have to deal with it anymore. And then he took that power right back. He told me that if we ever broke up, that he was going to print off the nudes that I had sent. I made the mistake of sending him nude photos of myself because I was a child and I, didn't think it through all the way. And he said that he would spread them all around school. I felt disgusted, completely disgusted. It was completely terrifying. At 13, I had no idea what to do with that. I didn't want to be in trouble with my mom or my parents for, making that mistake. I just finally texted him like, fine, I'm sorry. So I just stayed with him. I felt like I had to apologize to him for him to stop being that way. The entire time, even up until after I was shot, I felt like I was the one who messed up. I felt like I was the one who did something wrong. I was the one who hurt him. He had me so convinced that I was the one doing something wrong. If I could look back and tell myself in that moment, I would tell myself to leave, to save myself. So much hurt and so much regret and so much pain. If I could go back and tell little Abby that she is worth it and she is beautiful, I would do it in a heartbeat. I didn't leave because he had my nudes and he said that he would spread them all around school. So I just stayed with him for mainly the fact of that at first, and then I did end up falling in love with him. I was super in love with him. I felt a really strong desire to help Brian because I felt like he had no one else. I told myself that he was sad and he was broken and that I just felt like he never knew genuine love, and I wanted him to understand that feeling. The way that Brian showed any kind of physical affection was through sex, and that was about it. I would tell him that I didn't want to, and he would just not take no for an answer. He never was that kind of person. It was, I want what I want, and that's what we're doing. One day, he had sexually assaulted me, and I had enough. It made me angry because I do nothing but, care and respect him, so why would he degrade me like that?
Brian,
He understood the actions that he was doing, and he understood the harm that it was causing me, and he didn't care.
You can't treat me like that.
What are you even talking about?
I'm leaving.
And I told him that I was done, and he completely lost it.
You're what?
They started throwing things around the
You
apartment.
think someone else is gonna put up with
It was very scary.
You're not going anywhere!
I was distraught, and I was half naked, and I packed the little things that I had, and I escaped. He was trying to grab me and drag me back into the apartment. But then suddenly a kind neighbor stood in front of me and wouldn't let him touch me. Then I left. And I was hoping never to speak to him again. And that was super, super, super hard. It was a very hard day. It took everything I had to walk away that day. He started stalking me super heavy. Every time I was somewhere, he was somewhere. Every time I looked out my window, he was parked across the street. He would email me every day because I had blocked him on everything else. And eventually, he said he was going to kill himself, and he sent a picture of himself in a bathtub with the razor blades. My friend killed himself when we were like 12. And he knew that would get to me. And, I ended up going over there and, made sure he was safe. He was crying and telling me he loves me and he doesn't want to be on this earth without me, and just making me feel really bad about it. And it was my fault that all of this was happening to him. I told him that the way he treated me wasn't okay. And that I didn't want to be in that type of relationship. And he, I can change and I can get better. I definitely believed all of him. And that he sucked me back in. We got engaged in South Padre Island. We went on a family trip there. He waited till all of my family was away from us, and he got down on one knee and, brought a ring out, and I said yes. Later on, I went to the store and I bought a pregnancy test. And when I came home, I didn't really tell anybody because I didn't think it was going to be positive. And the second blue line showed up, and I was so ecstatic instantly. I was so happy. I remember looking at it and almost dropping it because I was, in shock. And I turned around and Brian was like, what's wrong? And he sees it and he just goes blank almost. It was weird. I've never seen him look like that. He didn't really have any emotion on his face or anything. He told me that he did not want to be a dad. He suggested a few times that maybe we do an abortion. It absolutely tore me into pieces because I always wanted a baby. Him becoming a dad, it was honestly the beginning of the end. I definitely enjoyed my pregnancy. I enjoyed it a lot. Things were really good for a long time. We lived with my parents literally until the day before I was going to be induced. I really hoped that when Styles was born, we would become a happy family, but that's not how life worked out. The ride home from the hospital was normal. It was all normal. Can I have a break? I'm not feeling well.
Of course.
I just don't feel very good. Sorry, I'm just in pain.
Oh, you're in pain?
Yeah, just sitting here for a long time. I don't usually get out of bed. I'm not physically fit, so this is a lot, but I'm trying. So sorry if I have to get up and walk around, so.
Totally fine.
9:17 interview, take 7, soft 6.
I didn't really want to move, but he wanted to move because he had some issues with my family. He'd been arguing with my family. He didn't let anyone come over after the baby was born to meet him, to hold him, nothing. It took 5 months for my son to meet my brother. So he isolated me really, really, really bad after we had our son. He instantly became a monster because we could be alone and no one was there to help me. I was taking a shower and he never would hold the baby or like watch the baby while I took a shower. So I had the bouncer right outside the shower and the baby started crying. So I called for him and I asked him if he would come and pick him up.
Ryan!
You know, I yelled out, "Hey, can you come help me with the baby?" And instantly I was terrified because I was like, I shouldn't have even asked, you know what I mean? I should have just got out of the shower. He came in there super angry and ripped the curtain back and choked me. When he was choking me, he had both of his hands wrapped around my neck. And he had like lifted me off the floor almost. I looked him right in his eyes and they were black. He was gone. He really wasn't there. And he choked me until I passed out.
Wake up! Hey! Hey! Wake up! Listen to me!
When I was coming to, I was just confused. You know, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on around me. He was screaming at me. The baby's crying, you know. I didn't even know where I was when I first woke up. It was scary for me. He had no remorse, nothing. Just no regard for me at all. He definitely could have killed me that day. That was the end. I had enough and I decided I was gonna leave. I waited till he went to work and I called my entire family. I told them I was covered in bruises and I needed help, and every single one of them showed up. We cleared out his entire house basically because everything was mine, and we just left. And then when he had to come home from work and realize that his entire house and his child and his fiance were gone. At that point, I was done. That there was nothing that he could say or do to make me come home. I had to let him have visitations because that's the law, you know. And then he suddenly wanted my child. He was doing it to hurt me. I was really scared that he wasn't going to watch him or feed him or, you know, take care of him. So that's what we dealt with for a long time until I met Jordan. I decided that I was going to start dating again. I decided it was time and I was ready. I ended up matching with this guy and he was super cute. He looked sweet and then we just ended up clicking like instantly. He showed me what real love was. He showed me cuddling. He showed me kisses. He showed me, how gentle love and real love. And I never knew that, and I never knew that I could have that. He asked me to come over and look at the cake pops that he had made for my son's birthday. I did not want to go to his house because I was afraid, but I did want to see these cake pops because the party was a few days away. I walked in the kitchen, I saw the cake pops, they were really cool. I turned around and he grabbed me by my hair. He dragged me to the bed, and that's when he sexually assaulted me. I, just waited for it to be over, and then when he went to the kitchen, I grabbed my stuff and I ran out. I left my son there because I tried to get out as quickly as I could. I dream about it every night, I am so traumatized by that. I sent my mom over there the next day to grab him. I was going nowhere near the house. I promised shortly now that I wouldn't go over there ever again. I don't really feel well. I honestly threw up while I was on lunch, so I'm not just technically feeling very well.
You need to take a break.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, I know we just started back. I just feel like dizzy and hot and...
So why don't we take a break?
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No.
Are you getting dizzy?
Yeah. Just in a lot of pain and I'm crashing.
Welcome back, Abby. You just want to put that through your shirt.
Thank you. I think last time that I had to stop because I was in a lot of physical pain that wasn't under control medically. Also, it was just mentally straining, which I wasn't expecting. By the end of it, I was literally falling asleep. And I feel like that was just because of bringing up the past trauma was exhausting to my body. Physical pain is just in the moment, but educating other people and preventing them from having this pain is really my ultimate goal. It was super important for me to come back and finish the interview because I wanted to make sure that women and men out there are still hearing my story and still making sure they're not doing the same things that I did and making the same mistakes. I'd like to save at least one person from feeling like they're less than they are. That's me. This is my favorite picture of me before I got shot. My hair is my favorite color. My eyebrows were dyed too. And my skin was just beautiful. I really thought that I was the ugliest person. And looking back, I just wish I would have known, like, just how naturally beautiful I was. It's super hard. I actually spend a lot of time looking at photos of myself from back then. I don't recognize myself from back then anymore. I think just kind of the new me is who I dream about now and stuff. So yeah, it's just really weird to look at old photos of me. It makes me sad, but it also makes me happy. So I woke up that morning and I texted his dad to drop him off at my mom's. And I got in the car and I drove to my mom's house where my son was already supposed to be. And he wasn't there. I texted him and he said that his van car door broke and he couldn't take Styles to my mom's. I had to come get him. And it sounded fishy. So I didn't want to go, but my mom convinced me that we should just go get him, give Brian a little bit of, grace, which we should not have done. We drove over there in silence. He was texting her the whole time, asking if I was in the car with her. Is she with you? Is she with you? Is she with you? And my mom answered yes, she's with me. And then he didn't answer again. And then we arrived at his house and she got out of the car because he told her to come up and get the baby. So she got out of the car and I pulled my phone out to message my boyfriend, Jordan. I definitely knew I was not supposed to be at his house. I felt uneasy. That whole morning, I didn't feel okay. I needed to get my son out of that house, and that's all I really wanted to do. And as I was texting Jordan, I heard 2 shots. And when I looked up, I saw his face behind the biggest gun I had ever seen in my life. So I had seconds to react. So for the 3rd shot, I threw my hands up and tried to protect my face as I turned. And he shot me through my fingers into my face. And the seconds after that, I wasn't in pain. I didn't know that I had been shot in 2 other places. I thought it had just been my face. So I reached up and tried to put pressure on my face, and when I put my hand there, there was nothing there. It was just an empty hole. So I put my hand back down, and I remember looking at all the blood, and then I remember turning my head as far as I could to look for my mom, because I wanted to know where my son was. I didn't know if my son was alive in that apartment or not. And I think that was the scariest part. And I heard his cry. And as soon as I heard his cry, I knew that I was gonna keep fighting because I wasn't gonna go with my son there. So I held on as hard as I could. And I saw my mom cradle him with her whole body, as she was running down the stairs, trying to protect him as much as she could because we didn't know where Brian had went. And the last things that I remember is my mom holding my hand, asking me to please stay because she didn't know how to live this life without me in it.
Honey, breathe. It's gonna be all right.
And then I woke up in the hospital A few days, like a week later, that's when the pain hit me. And then the pain never stopped after that. It really didn't. I opened my eyes and I had to realize that my eye was gone. My mom was standing there. I reached up and touched my eye and she said, yes, it's gone. I couldn't save it. It was heartbreaking. I felt like the world was half as beautiful. And I felt that way for a long time. I was shot in my face, heart, and lung, but it also hit the window and exploded. So it kind of shot me everywhere at the same time. Because of the trach, I couldn't speak. I could barely move. The whole waking up process was just very traumatizing. I wanted to know exactly what happened to him, where he went, what happened. And Brian actually, 60 seconds after he shot me the third time, he shot himself once, and it was a fatal shot to the head. It was kind of a peaceful feeling, but also a very painful feeling. And to this day, I still don't really know how to process that. There's an anger there. It's almost like he gets to get away with this. Because I can tell my story all I want, but he's never gonna understand how it felt to be the victim. He's never gonna understand how it felt to be completely controlled or, told what to wear, told what to do, being imprisoned, you know what I mean? He never understood how he made me feel. And I feel like in that way, he kind of got away with it.
We always reach out to police departments whenever we do stories, and they did send us the 911 call.
I've never heard it.
Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay, you don't have to.
Yeah, I would like to hear that. I didn't know that was ever an option. This might be really hard for me, okay? This is the part in my memory that I don't have. This is the one part that I don't have. And you guys are about to fill it in for me. Because the last thing I remember is her getting in the car.
You respond to County 911. Do you need police, fire, or medical?
I need help! He shot her! He shot her! He shot my daughter! Please, she's not... Please! It's okay, Sam. It's okay. It's okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm getting them to you. Hold on just a moment.
Please help me. Please. Let me breathe. Let me breathe. Hurry up, please. We shot her in the face. Close range, twice, with some kind of rifle, and then he ran.
Hey, ma'am, I'm getting the EMS to you right away. Hold on. I'm going to transfer you over to the EMS. Do not hang up.
Keep breathing. Keep breathing. Deep breath. Deep breath.
Wow. Wow. You could hear me breathing. You could hear my son screaming. And she stayed so calm. And I've never been so proud. That was the only hole that was missing. Thank you for showing that to me. I needed to feel that piece in because I have so much more sympathy for my mom. I was pretty angry at her for making me go that day. But I didn't really know what she went through that day either. Yeah, that was a lot. I've had so many surgeries that I literally cannot count. I had to have my heart repaired twice. I had to have both lungs repaired. They also took bones from both my hips to put in the top of my face and in the inside of my mouth where I wouldn't have a face. You can actually see that my sideburn that was over here is actually over here now from where they stretched my skin so far. It's taken a lot. I'm actually having another surgery. So, yeah, it's gonna be multiple more steps. The hardest part about recovering is the fact that you have to start building your life again from nothing. I struggle with chronic pain is what they call it. But yeah, it's all the time. But I have a great support system. I have so much support that I have to move back up sometimes because they're all just ready to be there for me, and it's amazing. Jordan is my best friend. He really is. He's my support. He's my strength. He's everything to me, and I feel like God put him in my life for a reason. He really did. Jordan. He is my absolute best friend in the entire world. It makes me so unbelievably happy. I live a really great life. I'm so much happier now than I was before. I'm so much more at peace. Hi, it's Abby again. I'm the one who was shot 3 times, once in my face, once in my heart, and once in my lung. It was really important for me to start making videos just so that I could get the word out there. I really struggled for a long time with this is my fault. But I just wanted to let you guys know that, and you guys create such a support system that it's crazy. Thank you guys for listening. It was very important for me to come back and finish. I don't think I would have been okay with leaving it unfinished.
That was hard for you too.
Yeah. I want people to take away the fact that you're strong enough to do anything. If you put your mind to it, you're strong enough to do anything. If I can take 3 bullets, you can do it. You know, you're strong enough to do whatever you put your mind to. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Domestic violence is everywhere, and we all deserve love. And if you're giving love, you should be getting love.
This picture shows the true Jagada Pearson Sr. Evil, cold, no soul. I lived in...
There are certain geographical coordinates that become permanently etched into the collective memory of a city, transforming overnight from places of mundane daily routine into monuments of profound, unresolved grief. In the sprawling, ever-evolving landscape of Texas, where the vastness of the state often mirrors the scale of its history, some shadows refuse to fade beneath the glaring sun. The city of Austin in the early 1990s was a place on the precipice of massive cultural and technological transformation, yet it still retained the quiet, unassuming innocence of a tightly knit community. It was a city where neighbors knew each other, where teenagers could safely linger at local haunts long after the streetlights flickered on, and where the concept of extreme, calculated brutality seemed like a distant nightmare belonging only to larger, more cynical metropolises. But on a cool Friday night in the final month of the year, that illusion of safety was shattered with such absolute devastation that the fragments have never truly been put back together. This is not merely a story about a crime. It is a cinematic descent into an abyss of forensic complexities, a tragedy that exposed the vulnerabilities of the justice system, and a haunting narrative about the theft of innocence. It is a case that has generated thousands of leads, ruined multiple lives through the desperate pursuit of closure, and ultimately left investigators staring into the void. This is the story of the Austin Yogurt Shop murders, a cold case that continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the state of Texas more than 3 decades later. The date was December the 6th, 1991. The holiday season was quietly unfurling across the city, bringing with it a sense of anticipation and communal warmth. Located on North Lamar Boulevard, a busy and familiar commercial artery in Austin, sat a popular frozen yogurt franchise known as I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. In the lexicon of American youth, establishments like this are more than just retail stores. They are sanctuaries of adolescence. They are brightly lit, pastel-colored spaces filled with laughter, the clinking of spoons, and the carefree conversations of teenagers navigating the twilight between childhood and adulthood. On this particular Friday evening, the shop was transitioning from the busy rush of weekend customers to the quiet, methodical process of closing down for the night. The neon signs were humming, the display cases were being wiped down, and the cash registers were being tallied. It was a scene of absolute, unremarkable normalcy. Inside the shop were 4 young women, their lives intersecting in a routine that should have ended with them locking the doors and heading safely home. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas, both 17 years old, were the employees tasked with the evening shift. They were at the age where part-time jobs represent independence, a stepping stone into the wider world. They were responsible, diligent, and simply going through the familiar motions of cleaning the counters and preparing the store for the next morning. Accompanying them were 2 younger girls, deeply intertwined in their social circle. Sarah Thomas, the 12-year-old younger sister of Eliza, had come to the shop to wait for her sister's shift to end so they could travel home together. With Sarah was her 13-year-old best friend, Amy Ayers, who had tagged along for the evening, planning to catch a ride home with the older girls once the store was secured. The presence of these 4 girls, ranging in age from 12 to 17, underscores the profound vulnerability of the victims. They were practically children, existing in a space they believed to be entirely safe, surrounded by the mundane tools of a retail job. The stark contrast between the innocence of their youth and the unimaginable horror that was about to unfold serves as the emotional core of this tragedy, a horrifying reminder of how quickly the sanctuary of normal life can be violently breached. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the bustling energy of North Lamar Boulevard had largely quieted down. The surrounding businesses had closed, and the streets were mostly empty, save for the occasional passing vehicle. At approximately 11:45 in the evening, an Austin police officer conducting a routine patrol of the area noticed something amiss. A thick, dark plume of smoke was billowing from the rear of the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt building. The sight of smoke in a commercial district at that hour immediately triggered an emergency response. The officer called it in, and the fire department was swiftly dispatched to the scene, expecting to confront a standard structural fire, perhaps an electrical short or a kitchen accident. They arrived with sirens wailing, their heavy boots hitting the pavement as they unspooled massive hoses, ready to battle the flames that were rapidly consuming the back portion of the establishment. The immediate priority was containment and suppression, battling the chaotic element of fire before it could spread to neighboring structures. However, as the brave firefighters pushed their way into the suffocating, smoke-filled interior of the building, aiming their high-pressure streams of water at the heart of the inferno, they breached the threshold of the back storage room. It was within this small, confined space that the true nature of the emergency revealed itself, transforming a routine fire call into one of the most gruesome and chilling crime scene discoveries in the history of American law enforcement. When the flames were finally beaten back and the heavy smoke began to clear, the first responders were met with a sight of unspeakable cruelty. Lying on the floor of the storage room were the bodies of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy. The absolute brutality of the scene defied any logical comprehension. The 4 young girls had been entirely stripped of their clothing, leaving them completely vulnerable and degraded in their final moments. In a display of chilling, methodical control, the perpetrators had used the girls' own garments to bind them. Their hands were pulled back and tied securely behind their backs, rendering them utterly defenseless. The physical arrangement of the victims spoke volumes about the cold, calculating nature of the killers. The bodies were not scattered in a panic. They were deliberately stacked together in a macabre pile, suggesting a terrifying level of dominance and a sadistic disregard for human life. The horror did not end with their captivity and degradation. Each of the 4 girls had been executed in an identical, ruthless manner. They had been shot a single time in the back of the head, a classic execution-style method designed to ensure immediate death without the perpetrators having to look their victims in the eyes. The sheer finality of the act, carried out against children and teenagers in the back room of a yogurt shop, sent shockwaves of revulsion through the seasoned first responders who discovered them. The physical evidence at the scene indicated that this was not the work of a single, panicked individual. The complex logistics of subduing, stripping, binding, and executing 4 separate victims in a confined space strongly suggested the presence of at least 2 attackers, working in tandem with a shared, monstrous intent. Furthermore, the fire itself was quickly determined to be no accident. The heavy scent of liquid chemical accelerant hung stubbornly in the air, mixing with the smell of charred wood and extinguished ash. The killers had deliberately doused the victims and the surrounding storage room in gasoline before striking a match. This was a calculated, forensic countermeasure. The fire was designed to be a weapon of erasure, a destructive force unleashed specifically to consume any physical trace of the attackers. It was meant to burn away skin cells, hair, fibers, and the telltale markers of DNA that might have been left behind during the assault. It was an attempt to silence the victims not just in life, but in death, by obliterating the very evidence of the crime committed against them. The immediate aftermath of the discovery was a chaotic nightmare for investigators. The perpetrators' strategy of using fire had been devastatingly effective, but the response of the fire department had inadvertently compounded the forensic tragedy. The massive volume of high-pressure water required to save the building from total destruction had washed over the crime scene, flushing away potential clues, diluting blood spatter patterns, and turning the charred remnants of the back room into a muddy, disorganized swamp. The delicate, microscopic evidence that investigators rely upon to build a profile of a killer was either incinerated by the extreme heat or washed down the drains by the thousands of gallons of water. In the desperate hours and days that followed, the Austin Police Department launched one of the most intensive investigations in the state's history. They scoured the charred remains of the yogurt shop, eventually recovering crucial ballistic evidence. The autopsies confirmed the grim reality of the scene, revealing that a .22 caliber handgun had been used in the executions. The medical examiners also discovered deeply troubling signs indicating that the girls had been subjected to sexual assault prior to their murders, adding an even darker layer of predatory motive to the crime. Curiously, the motive did not appear to be primarily financial. While the shop had been attacked, investigators noted that the perpetrators had not emptied the establishment of all its cash. A portion of the money remained untouched in the safe, suggesting that the robbery might have been an afterthought or a secondary objective to the violence itself. The city of Austin was plunged into a state of collective terror and mourning. The arbitrary nature of the crime, striking down 4 innocent girls in a familiar, public space, meant that no one felt entirely safe. The police department opened dedicated hotlines, pleading with the public for any information, no matter how seemingly insignificant. Over the ensuing years, this desperate search for truth would generate more than 3,000 individual tips and leads. Detectives would conduct hundreds of exhaustive interviews, chasing phantoms down blind alleys and traveling across state lines in pursuit of a resolution that always seemed to slip just beyond their grasp. The investigation would stretch over a grueling decade, characterized by immense public pressure, mounting frustration, and the slow, agonizing erosion of hope. It would eventually lead investigators down a controversial path, resulting in marathon interrogations, coerced statements, and the highly publicized arrests of 4 young men. It would see dramatic courtroom battles, the handing down of a life sentence and a death penalty, and the temporary illusion that justice had finally been served. But the truth of the Austin yogurt shop murders was far more complex and elusive than anyone wanted to admit. It was a truth hidden deep within the microscopic strands of biological evidence, waiting for technology to evolve enough to reveal it. When the advent of advanced Y chromosome DNA testing finally arrived nearly 2 decades later, it would shatter the convictions, overturn the official narrative, and forcefully drag the case back to square one. The undeniable scientific proof that the genetic material left at the scene did not belong to any of the convicted men would force the city to confront a terrifying reality. The true monsters who walked into that yogurt shop on a quiet December night, who bound, assaulted, and executed for innocent girls, had vanished into the smoke and the night. Their biological signature remains locked in the sterile databases of federal law enforcement, a silent, unmatched ghost in the machine, ensuring that the bloodiest chapter in Austin's history remains a devastating, open wound. To understand the profound weight of the tragedy that unfolded on the night of December the 6th, 1991, one must first understand the environment in which it occurred and the specific phase of life that the 4 young victims were navigating. Austin, Texas, in the early 1990s was a city experiencing a unique cultural moment. It was a place that retained a strong sense of local community, a sprawling urban environment that still somehow felt like a deeply interconnected town. The era preceding the total ubiquity of the internet and mobile communication relied heavily on physical spaces for social gathering and interaction. For teenagers, the geography of their world was defined by the places they could walk to, the places they could drive to once they earned their licenses, and the places where their peers congregated. Retail establishments, particularly fast food restaurants and frozen yogurt shops, served a dual purpose in this ecosystem. They were places of commerce, but more importantly, they were sanctuaries of youth. They were brightly lit, accessible environments where adolescents could experience a taste of independence away from the immediate supervision of their homes and schools. The establishment located on North Lamar Boulevard, operating under the name I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, was a perfect example of such a sanctuary. Situated on a busy commercial artery, it was a familiar landmark for the residents of the surrounding neighborhoods. The interior of the shop, typical of early 90s franchise design, would have been a space of bright fluorescent lighting, pastel color schemes, and the constant, low hum of refrigeration units keeping the sweet products frozen. For the adults of Austin, it was merely a place to purchase a dessert. But for the young people who worked there and the peers who visited them, it was an anchor point in their daily routines. It was a space that belonged to them in the twilight hours of the evening, a transitional zone between the structured demands of the school day and the eventual return to their family homes. Understanding this setting is crucial because it highlights the absolute violation of a space that was universally perceived as safe, innocent, and inherently benign. Within this brightly lit environment, 2 17-year-old girls were entrusted with the responsibilities of the evening shift. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas were at the precise age where adolescence begins to firmly give way to adulthood. Being 17 is a profoundly transitional period. It is an age defined by the acquisition of new responsibilities, the pursuit of independence, and the sudden realization that the protective bubble of childhood is slowly dissolving. For teenagers like Jennifer and Eliza, holding a part-time job at a local retail store was a rite of passage. It was a way to earn their own money, to prove their reliability to their parents and employers, and to establish a foothold in the adult world of schedules, customer service, and financial accountability. The fact that they were working the closing shift on a Friday night speaks to their maturity and the trust placed in them by the store management. Closing a retail establishment is a methodical, almost ritualistic process that requires diligence and attention to detail. The responsibilities weighing on Jennifer and Eliza that night were mundane, but significant for girls their age. They were tasked with ensuring that the store was immaculate for the morning crew, which meant wiping down the sticky counters, cleaning the yogurt machines, mopping the floors, and securely locking the exterior doors. They were also responsible for the financial culmination of the day, required to count the cash drawer, reconcile the receipts, and secure the earnings in the store safe. This process demands a level of focus and maturity that both girls clearly possessed. They were not merely teenagers hanging out. They were young women functioning as the caretakers of a commercial business in the vulnerable hours approaching midnight. The image of these 2 17-year-olds, diligently going through the familiar motions of closing up the shop, underscores their responsibility and entirely shatters any attempt to rationalize or minimize the horror of what they were about to face. They were doing exactly what society asked of them, working hard and following the rules in a space they had every reason to believe was entirely secure. Sharing the quiet space of the yogurt shop that evening were two even younger girls, emphasizing the tragic spectrum of youth that would be extinguished in a single night. 12-year-old Sarah Thomas was the younger sister of Eliza. The dynamic between a 12-year-old and her 17-year-old sister is a complex and universal one. The older sibling often acts as a bridge to the wider world, a figure of authority, but also a source of admiration and protection. For Sarah, the yogurt shop was not a workplace. It was an extension of her sister's world, a place she could visit to spend time with Eliza and wait for the safety of a shared ride home. At 12 years old, Sarah was merely on the threshold of her teenage years, still deeply rooted in the innocence of childhood. Her presence in the store was entirely dependent on familial bonds and the practical necessity of transportation. She was there simply because she loved and relied upon her older sister, waiting patiently in the colorful booths while Eliza and Jennifer completed their closing duties. Accompanying Sarah was her best friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. The bond between best friends at the ages of 12 and 13 is often one of the most intense and formative relationships a young person can experience. It is a time when the focus of social life shifts from the family unit to peer connections, when secrets are shared, and when the world is navigated as an inseparable pair. For Amy and Sarah, a Friday night spent hanging out at the local yogurt shop while an older sister finished her shift was a perfectly normal, innocent way to pass the time. It was an opportunity to be out of the house, to be part of the older teenager's orbit, and to simply enjoy the company of a best friend in a safe, public environment. Amy, like Sarah, was waiting for a ride, trusting in the older girls to safely deliver her back to her home and her family once the store was locked and secured. The convergence of these four specific lives in that small storage room on North Lamar Boulevard represents an unimaginable concentration of stolen potential. You have Jennifer and Eliza, at 17, standing on the very edge of their adult lives, their futures unwritten but full of the promise that comes with hard work and responsibility. You have Sarah and Amy, at 12 and 13, still entirely enveloped in the protective embrace of early adolescence, their minds occupied with the simple concerns of school, friendship, and family. They were sisters, they were best friends, they were colleagues, and they were daughters. They represented a cross-section of youth in the city of Austin, embodying the innocence, the ambition, and the vulnerability of growing up. Their presence in the store was not reckless. It was ordinary. It was the absolute normalcy of their actions that makes the subsequent violence so profoundly incomprehensible. As the evening deepened and the traffic on North Lamar Boulevard began to thin, the atmosphere inside the shop would have shifted. The bright lights of the interior would have stood in stark contrast to the growing darkness outside the large glass windows. For the four girls, the isolation of the closing shift was likely not a source of fear, but merely a routine part of the job. They were together, they were in a familiar place, and they were surrounded by the tools of their daily lives. The psychological security provided by the locked front doors and the illuminated commercial strip would have lulled them into a false sense of safety. They could not have possibly anticipated that the very environment they trusted was about to be breached by an overwhelming, predatory force. The tragedy of the Austin yogurt shop murders is not just the loss of life, but the complete and utter obliteration of innocence. These four girls were targeted in a space that defined their youth, a place of bright colors and sweet treats, transformed in a matter of minutes into a site of unimaginable degradation and terror. The perpetrators did not just steal money or property. They stole the fundamental right of these girls to grow up, to experience the milestones of adulthood, and to live out the natural course of their lives. When we examine the profiles of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy, we are forced to look directly at the fragility of safety and the devastating impact of arbitrary violence. They were not involved in high-risk behaviors, they were not in a dangerous part of town, and they were not associating with criminal elements. They were simply being young, being responsible, and being together. In the annals of true crime, it is easy to become entirely focused on the mechanics of the investigation, the forensic details of the crime scene, and the psychological profiles of the suspects. However, to truly comprehend the gravity of this case, one must remain steadfastly anchored to the victims. Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, Amy Ayers. They are the center of this narrative, the reason why the city of Austin continues to mourn, and the reason why law enforcement continues to search for answers in the cold, unyielding data of genetic evidence. Their youth, their familial bonds, and their inherent innocence stand as a permanent indictment against the unknown individuals who orchestrated their demise. As the timeline of the night moved inexorably toward midnight, the quiet camaraderie of the four girls was about to be intercepted by a darkness so profound that it would forever alter the history of Texas law enforcement. The sanctuary was about to fall, and the ordinary trajectory of their young lives was about to be violently, permanently severed. The transition from an ordinary Friday night of teenage routine into a horrific crime scene remains one of the most chilling sequences in the annals of American criminal history. As the clock approached the midnight hour on December the 6th, 1991, the external world surrounding the "I can't believe it's yogurt" shop on North Lamar Boulevard had largely fallen silent. The bustling commercial activity of the evening had ebbed away, leaving the streets of Austin mostly deserted under the glow of overhead streetlights. Inside the brightly illuminated establishment, the four young girls were moving through the final, routine motions of closing the store. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas were finishing the tedious tasks of cleaning the counters, securing the equipment, and preparing the cash registers, while 12-year-old Sarah Thomas and her 13-year-old best friend Amy Ayers waited patiently in the seating area, anticipating the end of the shift and the journey home. They were completely unaware that the safety of their enclosed world was about to be violently shattered by an external force driven by predatory intent and absolute malice. The exact mechanism of how the perpetrators gained entry into the establishment remains shrouded in the terrifying ambiguity of a cold case, but the physical reality of the subsequent events tells a story of overwhelming, calculated dominance. At some point late in the evening, the doors were breached, and the four defenseless girls were confronted by at least two ruthless attackers. The sheer logistics of subduing four individuals simultaneously, especially in a commercial setting with multiple points of exit, required organization, coordination, and weapons. The perpetrators utilized a .22 caliber handgun, a small and easily concealable firearm that would prove to be the instrument of ultimate destruction. In the confined space of the shop, the girls were systematically rounded up, stripped of their individual agency, and forced under threat of lethal violence into the back storage room, a small and windowless enclave that would soon become their final prison. Within the claustrophobic confines of the back room, the level of degradation escalated with chilling methodical precision. The attackers forced the four young girls to strip off all of their clothing, reducing them entirely to states of vulnerability and exposing them to the raw terror of their captors. In a display of calculated cruelty, the perpetrators used the victims' own garments to bind them. Their hands were pulled tightly behind their backs and secured with knots, rendering them utterly defenseless and incapable of physical resistance or escape. The physical arrangement of the victims in the aftermath revealed a disturbing dynamic of absolute control and dominance. The four girls were not scattered in panic across the room, but were instead deliberately stacked together in a macabre pile on the floor. This precise positioning underscores the terrifying reality that the girls were held captive, conscious of their impending fate, while the perpetrators exerted total power over their lives. Furthermore, forensic examinations would later uncover deeply troubling physical evidence indicating that the girls were subjected to sexual assault prior to their executions, adding an even darker layer of sadistic motivation to the horrific ordeal. The horror reached its absolute zenith when the perpetrators moved from captivity to execution. Each of the four young girls was subjected to the same ruthless, cold-blooded method of termination. Standing over their bound and helpless victims, the killers placed the muzzle of the .22 caliber handgun against the back of each girl's head and pulled the trigger. It was a classic execution-style method, designed to ensure immediate, unquestioned death without the perpetrators having to look into the faces of the children they were destroying. The sudden, muffled cracks of the firearm inside the small storage room brought a permanent, violent halt to the futures of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy. There was no mercy shown, no hesitation, and no compromise. The arbitrary slaughter of these 4 innocent lives was executed with a chilling detachment that defied any rational understanding of human behavior. Once the executions were complete, the perpetrators faced the immediate problem of leaving behind a massive trail of physical and biological evidence. To counter this, they initiated the final, destructive phase of their horrific plan. They gathered combustible materials and deliberately doused both the bodies of the victims and the surrounding interior of the back storage room in a heavy liquid chemical accelerant, specifically gasoline. The pungent, suffocating scent of fuel filled the enclosed space, mixing heavily with the horrific atmosphere of violence. With a flick of a match or a lighter, the killers ignited the accelerant, unleashing a wall of hungry, destructive flames designed to consume everything in their path. The fire was not merely a byproduct of chaos. It was a calculated, forensic weapon meant to act as a silent eraser. The perpetrators intended for the extreme heat and consuming inferno to obliterate fingerprints, hair follicles, skin cells, fibers, and every trace of biological DNA that might link them to the crime scene. It was an attempt to murder the truth itself, ensuring that the girls would be silenced not only in life, but that the very physical evidence of their suffering would be reduced to ash and cinder. As the flames caught hold and began to devour the storage room, generating a thick, dark plume of smoke that began to leak out into the main areas of the store and eventually toward the exterior, the perpetrators made their escape into the cold Austin night. They slipped away into the darkness, leaving behind a scene of unspeakable devastation. The fire continued to eat away at the back room, threatening to bring down the entire structure of the building as the midnight hour ticked past. For a brief, agonizing period, the crime scene existed in absolute isolation, the victims lying motionless in the growing heat and smoke while the outside world remained entirely oblivious to the catastrophe that had just occurred within the brightly colored walls of the yogurt shop. The first indication that something was catastrophically wrong came purely by chance. At approximately 11:45 in the evening, an Austin police officer was driving past the commercial strip on North Lamar Boulevard as part of a routine patrol. In the quiet darkness of the late hour, the officer's attention was suddenly drawn to an anomaly against the skyline. A thick, dark plume of smoke was billowing from the rear of the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt building. Recognizing the immediate danger of a structure fire in a commercial area, the officer radioed in the emergency, triggering a rapid response from the local fire department. Sirens began to wail through the quiet streets, shattering the nocturnal silence and bringing heavy rescue vehicles rushing toward the scene. The firefighters arrived expecting a standard structural emergency, perhaps dealing with faulty wiring or a kitchen malfunction. They leaped from their trucks, unspooled heavy, high-pressure hoses, and prepared to breach the building to battle the flames that were actively threatening to consume the rear of the establishment. Entering the smoke-filled interior of the shop, the firefighters advanced with their hoses, aiming powerful streams of water directly at the seat of the fire in the back storage room. They beat back the roaring flames, suppressing the destructive element and clearing the way so that they could inspect the extent of the structural damage. But as the blinding smoke began to clear and the harsh beams of their flashlights illuminated the scorched interior of the small room, the true horror of the situation was violently revealed. What they encountered was not a routine fire investigation, but an active, catastrophic crime scene of unimaginable proportions. Lying before them were the charred, bound bodies of the 4 young girls, arranged in a horrifying testament to premeditated murder. The shock waves of this discovery immediately reverberated through the ranks of the first responders, transforming a standard rescue operation into the opening moments of the most complex, agonizing, and baffling murder investigation in the history of the state of Texas. The quiet innocence of North Lamar Boulevard was gone forever, replaced by an enduring mystery that would haunt investigators, families, and the collective conscience of the community for decades to come. The discovery of the 4 lifeless bodies in the charred back room of the yogurt shop immediately transformed a routine structural fire investigation into the largest and most complex manhunt in the history of the Austin Police Department. As dawn broke over North Lamar Boulevard on the morning of December the 7th, 1991, The reality of the tragedy began to sink into the collective consciousness of the city, placing an immense, suffocating weight of expectation upon the shoulders of the investigators. The initial hours of any homicide investigation are widely considered the most critical window for preserving perishable clues, identifying fleeting witnesses, and locking down a pristine crime scene. However, in this specific instance, the very nature of the crime and the emergency response had combined to create an almost insurmountable forensic barrier. The extreme heat of the chemical fire had systematically baked the interior of the room, destroying delicate trace evidence, while thousands of gallons of high-pressure water pumped by the fire department had surged through the space, washing away blood spatter patterns, hair samples, fibers, and potential shoe prints that the perpetrators might have left behind in their hurried exit. Faced with a compromised and heavily damaged crime scene, detectives turned their immediate attention to the physical artifacts that had managed to survive the inferno. The most crucial of these physical clues was the recovery of ballistic evidence from the autopsies and the room itself, which definitively established that a small-caliber .22 handgun had been utilized to execute the 4 young girls. The medical examiners, working tirelessly under grim conditions, confirmed the horrific details of the captivity and revealed troubling indicators of sexual assault, providing forensic confirmation that the victims had been subjected to predatory violence before the fatal shots were fired. Yet, despite these harrowing medical insights, the physical trail grew dangerously thin. The deliberate use of gasoline as an accelerant had achieved its primary objective for the killers, effectively scrubbing the immediate area of fingerprints and touch DNA that could have pointed directly to their identities. Investigators were left staring at a chilling paradox: a crime scene of staggering brutality that was simultaneously stripped of the microscopic whispers that law enforcement relies upon to bridge the gap between a suspect and a victim. Realizing that the physical interior of the shop offered limited immediate answers, the department mobilized a massive investigative apparatus designed to cast the widest possible net across the city of Austin and beyond. The public appeal for information was unprecedented. Police spokespersons went on television, flooded local radio broadcasts, and plastered newspapers with pleas for anyone who had seen anything suspicious near North Lamar Boulevard on the night of December the 6th to come forward. The response from the community was overwhelming, reflecting the deep shock and fear that had gripped the populace. Over the ensuing weeks, months, and years, the Austin Police Department's dedicated hotlines would log more than 3,000 individual tips and leads. Detectives were inundated with information, ranging from credible sightings of unfamiliar vehicles to bizarre, unfounded claims from attention seekers and psychics. Each tip, no matter how improbable or far-fetched, had to be systematically vetted, logged, and investigated, consuming thousands of man-hours and threatening to swamp the small detective bureau under an avalanche of digital and paper files. The investigative process during these early years was a grueling exercise in frustration and false hope. Detectives chased phantoms down countless blind alleys, interviewing former employees, disgruntled acquaintances, local criminal elements, and transients who frequented the commercial strips of North Lamar. They traveled across state lines to follow up on vehicle sightings and background checks, interviewing individuals who happened to match vague descriptions provided by witnesses who had been in the vicinity of the shop around the time of the closing hour. Every time a new piece of information surfaced, a brief surge of hope would ripple through the department, only for the lead to inevitably dissolve into ambiguity as alibis were verified and forensic testing failed to establish a connection. The sheer volume of data was staggering, yet none of it pointed definitively toward the individuals who had actually breached the doors of the yogurt shop, subdued the 4 girls, and ignited the destructive fire. As the calendar pages turned and the investigation stretched from months into several agonizing years, the pressure from the victims' families, the media, and the public intensified to a fever pitch. The lack of an arrest became a glaring indictment of the system, a constant, painful reminder that justice was stalling while the killers remained anonymous. Detectives found themselves trapped in a psychological wear and tear cycle common in high-profile cold cases, where the desperation to provide closure leads to tunnel vision and an over-reliance on circumstantial pressure. The case shifted from an open, expansive exploration of all possibilities to a tense, narrow focus on specific circles of acquaintances, driven by the quiet, gnawing fear that the trail was rapidly growing cold beyond recovery. The initial momentum of the investigation had long since dissipated, replaced by the grim reality that solving the murders of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy would require either an unprecedented stroke of luck or a radical shift in forensic capability that had not yet been invented. This desperate climate of stagnation and mounting public anxiety laid the dangerous groundwork for the missteps that would define the next phase of the case. As the 90s drew to a close, the investigation drifted away from the elusive physical evidence of 1991 and began to circle back toward a group of young men who had been lingering on the periphery of the police department's radar for years. The passage of time had not dulled the public's demand for accountability. If anything, the approaching decade mark of the unsolved massacre amplified the urgency within the department. Detectives were desperate for a breakthrough, desperate for a confession, and desperate to close the books on a nightmare that continued to haunt the identity of Austin. This desperation would ultimately propel the investigation down a controversial and legally perilous path, setting the stage for marathon interrogations that would yield dramatic arrests, capture headlines across the nation, and ultimately plunge the entire judicial process into an abyss of doubt, coercion allegations, and profound systemic failure. As the 1990s drew to a close, the immense pressure to solve the Austin yogurt shop murders reached a boiling point, creating an atmosphere within the police department where the desperation for an arrest threatened to eclipse the pursuit of objective truth. Investigators were exhausted. The public was demanding accountability, and the approaching decade mark of the unsolved crimes served as a constant, humiliating reminder of institutional impotence. It was within this climate of intense psychological strain that detectives shifted their primary focus back to a group of young men who had been on the periphery of the investigation for years. These individuals were teenagers at the time of the murders in 1991, but as the years progressed, they had drifted through the local criminal underground, accumulating minor offenses and living on the margins of society. Police began to center their attention on Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn, convinced that within this circle lay the answers to a crime that had baffled the city for nearly a decade. The strategy that followed represented a dark turning point in the handling of the case, relying heavily on aggressive, psychologically punishing interrogation tactics rather than hard physical evidence. In the late autumn of 1999, detectives brought the young men in for questioning, separating them and subjecting them to relentless, high-pressure interrogation sessions that stretched on for hours without sleep, legal representation, or respite. The environment inside the interrogation rooms was designed to break down resistance, manipulate memory, and force a narrative that aligned with the department's working theories. For days, the suspects were subjected to intense psychological pressure, led through scenarios, and confronted with alleged evidence and statements from their peers. In this crucible of isolation and exhaustion, the psychological defenses of the young men began to fracture. The human mind under extreme, sustained duress is a fragile instrument, capable of adopting false narratives, regurgitating details fed by interrogators, and ultimately confessing to atrocities they did not commit simply to make the torment stop. The breaking point arrived when Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott finally cracked under the relentless weight of the interrogations, signing statements and providing recorded confessions that stunned the legal community. In these confessions, Springsteen and Scott detailed a horrific, coordinated narrative of the night of December 6, 1991. They claimed that they, along with Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, had planned a robbery, entered the yogurt shop, subdued the 4 young girls, forced them into the back room, committed unspeakable acts of violence, and ultimately executed them with a .22 caliber handgun before setting the building on fire. To the public and to the desperate detectives, these confessions felt like the cathartic resolution of an unbearable nightmare. It seemed that the puzzle pieces had finally fallen into place, providing the missing link that years of forensic failures had denied them. Based primarily on these confessions, the 4 young men were arrested and charged with capital murder, setting the stage for one of the most high-profile and legally contentious trials in the history of the state of Texas. The subsequent trials, which took place between 2001 and 2002, laid bare the deeply fractured and precarious nature of the state's case. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were tried separately, and the courtroom battles became fierce arenas of legal argument, medical testimony, and credibility challenges. For the prosecutors, the confessions were the crown jewels of their evidence, presented to the juries as undeniable proof of the defendant's guilt. They painted Springsteen and Scott as cold-blooded monsters who had terrorized the city of Austin. However, as the trials unfolded, defense attorneys aggressively exposed the profound vulnerabilities at the heart of the prosecution's narrative. The defense pointed out a staggering and irreconcilable fact. Despite the detailed confessions, there was not a single shred of physical evidence, not a fingerprint, not a hair, not a fiber, and not a drop of biological material linking Springsteen, Scott, Pierce, or Wellborn to the interior of the yogurt shop or to the bodies of the 4 victims. Furthermore, the defense introduced compelling testimony regarding the coercive nature of the interrogations, arguing that the confessions had been beaten out of their clients through psychological torture, sleep deprivation, and leading questions designed to implant specific details of the crime scene into the suspects' minds. The young men themselves immediately recanted their confessions as soon as they were out from under the thumb of the interrogators, insisting that they had lied out of sheer terror and exhaustion to escape the relentless pressure of the police room. Despite these glaring holes in the physical case and the serious allegations of coercion, the juries were swayed by the emotional weight of the confessions and the immense public pressure for justice. The legal machinery ground forward with unforgiving momentum. Robert Springsteen was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death, facing the ultimate penalty of the state. Michael Scott was similarly convicted, though the jury spared him the death penalty, sentencing him instead to life in prison. Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn faced separate legal maneuvers, but the primary pillars of the prosecution's success rested on the convictions of Springsteen and Scott. Yet, even as the gavels fell and the prison doors slammed shut behind the convicted men, a deep, pervasive unease lingered over the legal community and the investigative bureaus. The verdicts did not feel like a triumphant victory of truth, but rather like a fragile compromise born of desperation. The absence of any corroborating physical evidence remained a glaring neon sign pointing toward a potential miscarriage of justice. Legal experts, investigative journalists, and even some members of the original investigative team began to harbor quiet, gnawing doubts about whether the right men had truly been locked away. The convictions stood as legal facts, but the moral and forensic foundation upon which they were built was dangerously hollow. The state of Texas had secured its pound of flesh, closing the books on a public relations nightmare, but the fundamental reality of the crime remained entirely unverified by science. The stage was set for a dramatic, seismic reckoning, one that would expose the dangerous flaws of relying on coerced confessions and force the entire judicial system to confront the immutable, unforgiving power of advanced forensic DNA technology. The fragile and deeply controversial structure of convictions that the state of Texas had erected at the turn of the century was not built to withstand the relentless march of technological innovation and scientific progress. For years, the legal verdicts against Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott stood as the official resolution to the horror of December 6, 1991, serving as a convenient period at the end of a terrifying chapter in the city history. Yet beneath the surface of these legal closures, the silent, microscopic guardians of truth remained preserved in evidence lockers, waiting for a tool powerful enough to read their language. That tool arrived in the form of advanced genetic profiling, specifically the development and refinement of Y chromosome STR testing, a technique capable of isolating male DNA lineages even when mixed with overwhelming background contamination or degraded by extreme heat and environmental exposure. The legal teams representing the convicted men recognized the profound implications of this technology and pressed aggressively for modern DNA testing to be performed on the biological samples recovered from the victims, material that had never been successfully profiled during the initial investigation in the 1990s. The turning point that would shatter the official narrative arrived in 2008, when the legal foundations of the state case began to crumble under appellate scrutiny. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals formally overturned the convictions of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, ruling that their constitutional rights had been severely violated during their trials because they had been barred from cross-examining each other regarding their coerced statements, a major procedural flaw that invalidated the core pillar of the prosecution strategy. With their sentences vacated, the cases were remanded for potential retrials, throwing the district attorney office back into a state of profound legal vulnerability. It was during this period of re-examination that the forensic reality of the crime finally stepped out of the shadows. Scientists subjected the preserved biological samples extracted from the body of victim Amy Ayers to the advanced YSDR testing protocols, targeting the male genetic material left behind by the perpetrators on the night of the massacre. The results of this analysis were not merely ambiguous. They were an absolute, undeniable earthquake that leveled the state case to its foundations. The DNA profile generated from the crime scene material was crystal clear, and it carried a devastating message for the prosecution. The genetic signature recovered directly from the victim did not match Robert Springsteen. It did not match Michael Scott. It did not match Maurice Pierce. And it did not match Forrest Wellborn. In fact, when the profile was run through the national law enforcement databases, it failed to match any of the 4 young men who had spent years behind bars for a crime they consistently maintained they did not commit. The scientific reality was stark and unforgiving. An unknown male, an absolute phantom who had eluded detection since the night of the cold December slaughter, had left his biological footprint on the body of a victim. This was the definitive proof of innocence that the defense teams had argued for years, exposing the devastating dangers of relying on coerced confessions extracted under marathon interrogation conditions without a single shred of physical corroboration. Faced with this insurmountable scientific exoneration, the charges against Springsteen and Scott were formally dropped, and they were released from custody, stepping out into a world that had stolen years of their youth based on a flawed and desperate pursuit of a headline. Yet, the euphoria of exoneration for the wrongfully accused was severely tempered by the grim, haunting reality that confronted the investigators and the families of the victims. The release of Springsteen and Scott did not mean that justice had been achieved. Rather, it meant that the state of Texas had been dragged right back to the horrific starting point of December 6, 1991. The case was officially thrust back into the cold case files, stripped of the false closure that had provided a fragile illusion of peace for nearly a decade. The unknown profile obtained through YSDR testing was uploaded into the combined DNA index system, known as CODIS, the massive federal database where law enforcement agencies across the United States pool genetic profiles recovered from violent crime scenes in the perpetual hunt for a match. Day after day, month after month, and year after year, that digital placeholder sits within the system, silently comparing itself against millions of entries, waiting for the day when the true perpetrator either enters the criminal justice system through another offense or has a close relative submit genetic data to a genealogical database. The passage of time has done nothing to dull the sharp, agonizing edge of the tragedy for the families of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers. More than 3 decades have bled away since those 4 young girls walked into the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop on North Lamar Boulevard, trusting in the safety of their community and the predictability of their youthful routines. The physical structure of the store has long since changed. The neon signs have faded, and the city of Austin has ballooned into a sprawling, unrecognizable metropolis driven by rapid technological expansion and towering modern architecture. Yet, beneath the shiny surface of this modern boomtown, the ghost of 1991 remains anchored like an open wound that refuses to scar over. The community remembers. The veteran detectives who walked that ash-choked room still carry the heavy burden of failure, and the surviving relatives continue to wake up every single day in a world robbed of daughters, sisters, and friends. This enduring nightmare serves as a profound and sobering reminder of the limits of human institutions when confronted with the darkest extremes of human malice. It stands as a cautionary tale of how public pressure, media anxiety, and institutional desperation can combine to distort the pursuit of truth, leading investigators down dangerous roads of coercion and false conviction while the real monsters slip away into the smoke and the night. The pursuit of justice in the Austin yogurt shop murders is no longer merely a local police matter. It has evolved into a national symbol of the complexities inherent in cold case investigations and the absolute necessity of rigorous, uncompromised science. Until the day arrives when a cold hit flashes across a computer screen in the federal database, linking that anonymous YSTR profile to a living human being who can be hauled into a courtroom to answer for the horrors of that freezing December night. The story remains devastatingly incomplete. The silence of the evidence is deafening, echoing through the decades as a perpetual challenge to the state of Texas. A reminder that true justice cannot be manufactured through pressure or forged in the crucible of a forced confession, but must wait quietly for the undeniable, unyielding voice of the truth to finally speak from the ash. The passage of time in a protracted cold case investigation does not heal wounds so much as it alters their texture, transforming raw, bleeding trauma into an enduring structural scar upon the landscape of a community. More than 30 years after the freezing December night that permanently fractured the history of Austin, Texas, the investigation into the murders of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers occupies a unique and haunting space in the annals of American criminal justice. It stands not merely as an unsolved puzzle, but as a complex monument to human vulnerability, systemic failure, and the relentless, often agonizing pursuit of truth in the face of profound adversity. When the physical convictions of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were systematically dismantled by the revelations of advanced YSTR DNA profiling, the city was forced to look past the comforting illusion of closure and confront the raw, unvarnished reality that the true perpetrators of the atrocity had never been brought to account. This realization transformed the case from a closed chapter of judicial retribution back into an active, open-ended search for justice, casting a long and analytical shadow over how law enforcement approaches complex multi-victim homicides where initial evidence has been catastrophically compromised. From a systemic and legal perspective, the Austin yogurt shop murders have served as a harsh, unsparing masterclass in the dangers of investigative tunnel vision and the critical importance of rigorous evidentiary standards. The case is frequently studied by legal scholars, criminologists, and investigative training academies as a textbook example of how public pressure, media anxiety, and institutional desperation can warp the objective pursuit of truth. The reliance on marathon, high-pressure interrogations that yielded coerced confessions without a single shred of physical corroboration exposed a dangerous vulnerability in the criminal justice system of the late 20th century. It demonstrated how easily the human mind under extreme psychological duress can fracture, adopting and regurgitating narratives fed by investigators simply to escape immediate torment. The subsequent legal battles and ultimate overturning of those convictions underscored the indispensable role of modern forensic science as an objective arbiter of truth. DNA profiling did not merely correct a miscarriage of justice by freeing wrongfully accused men. It exposed the fundamental fragility of a case built on pressure rather than proof, establishing a permanent precedent for the necessity of preserving biological evidence and embracing technological innovation as it evolves. At the center of the ongoing, modern phase of the investigation lies the silent, patient vigilance of the federal DNA database system. The unique YSTR genetic profile recovered from the physical evidence of the crime scene remains logged within CODIS, functioning as a microscopic sentinel that never sleeps, never tires, and never forgets. Every time a new arrest is made anywhere in the nation, every time an individual enters the criminal justice system, and every time biological records are updated or expanded, that digital placeholder runs its quiet comparisons, searching across millions of profiles for a match that could finally bridge the decades-long chasm between the crime and its perpetrator. Furthermore, the rapid advancements in investigative genetic genealogy, a revolutionary discipline that combines DNA profiling with extensive historical family tree research, offer a glimmer of hope that the anonymous profile might eventually be traced through distant relatives, pointing detectives toward a familial lineage that has thus far eluded detection. This technological horizon represents the primary avenue through which cold cases of this magnitude are increasingly being solved, turning microscopic whispers of genetic material into roadmaps for modern investigators who refuse to let the trail go cold. The city of Austin itself has undergone a breathtaking metamorphosis since 1991, evolving from a sprawling, unpretentious Texas city into one of the most dynamic, technologically advanced, and densely populated metropolitan centers in the United States. The physical landscape of North Lamar Boulevard has been reshaped by modern real estate development, new storefronts, and the relentless march of urban expansion, rendering much of the physical environment of that fateful winter night almost unrecognizable to those who knew it decades ago. Yet, beneath the gleaming facade of this modern boomtown, the cultural and historical scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the civic consciousness. Veteran law enforcement officers who walked through that ash-choked room on the night of the fire have retired. A new generation of detectives has assumed command of the cold case division, and the collective memory of the city has been passed down through generations as a cautionary tale of innocence lost. The case is a permanent reminder that no matter how fast a city grows or how modern its infrastructure becomes, the past cannot simply be paved over. It demands to be resolved with truth and integrity. The enduring tragedy of the Austin yogurt shop murders stands as a profound testament to the limits of human institutions when confronted with the darkest extremes of human malice, balanced against the unyielding resilience of the scientific method and the human spirit. It is a narrative that spans decades, weaving together the mundane routines of teenage life, the terrifying mechanics of sudden violence, the agonizing flaws of the justice room, and the silent, patient promise of modern genetics. The four young girls whose lives were extinguished on December 6, 1991, Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers, deserve a final resolution that matches the gravity of their loss. Until the day arrives when that anonymous genetic profile finally triggers a match in the federal database, and the true monsters who orchestrated the massacre are dragged into the light of a courtroom, the shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas. It remains an open wound in the state's history, a perpetual challenge to the pursuit of absolute justice, and a solemn, unchanging vow that the truth, no matter how deeply buried beneath the ash of time and deception, will ultimately find a way to speak. The passage of time in a protracted cold case investigation does not heal wounds so much as it alters their texture, transforming raw, bleeding trauma into an enduring structural scar upon the landscape of a community. More than 30 years after the freezing December night that permanently fractured the history of Austin, Texas, the investigation into the murders of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers occupies a unique and haunting space in the annals of American criminal justice. It stands not merely as an unsolved puzzle, but as a complex monument to human vulnerability, systemic failure, and the relentless, often agonizing pursuit of truth in the face of profound adversity. When the physical convictions of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were systematically dismantled by the revelations of advanced YSDR DNA profiling, the city was forced to look past the comforting illusion of closure and confront the raw, unvarnished reality that the true perpetrators of the atrocity had never been brought to account. This realization transformed the case from a closed chapter of judicial retribution back into an active, open-ended search for justice, casting a long and analytical shadow over how law enforcement approaches complex multi-victim homicides where initial evidence has been catastrophically compromised. The human cost of this prolonged uncertainty is borne most heavily by the families and loved ones of the four young victims, whose lives were violently intercepted at the threshold of adulthood and adolescence. For the parents, siblings, and friends of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy, grief is not a linear journey with a definitive destination. It is an enduring, daily reality shaped by the absence of answers. The roller coaster of the legal process, from the agonizing years of silence in the 1990s to the false dawn of the convictions in the early 2000s, and finally to the seismic shock of the DNA exonerations in 2009, subjected these families to repeated cycles of trauma and emotional disruption. To watch the legal machinery convict men whose guilt was ultimately undermined by science, only to find themselves back at the starting line with an anonymous genetic profile sitting silently in a federal database, is an experience of institutional cruelty that defies easy consolation. Yet, despite the decades that have bled away, their commitment to keeping the memory of the girls alive and demanding accountability has never wavered. They remain the moral anchor of the ongoing investigation, ensuring that the victims are never reduced to mere case numbers or archival footnotes, but are remembered as vibrant, promising young individuals whose potential was brutally stolen in the back room of a suburban yogurt shop. From a systemic and legal perspective, the Austin yogurt shop murders have served as a harsh, unsparing masterclass in the dangers of investigative tunnel vision and the critical importance of rigorous evidentiary standards. The case is frequently studied by legal scholars, criminologists, and investigative training academies as a textbook example of how public pressure, media anxiety, and institutional desperation can warp the objective pursuit of truth. The reliance on marathon, high-pressure interrogations that yielded coerced confessions without a single shred of physical corroboration exposed a dangerous vulnerability in the criminal justice system of the late 20th century. It demonstrated how easily the human mind under extreme psychological duress can fracture, adopting and regurgitating narratives fed by investigators simply to escape immediate torment. The subsequent legal battles and ultimate overturning of those convictions underscored the indispensable role of modern forensic science as an objective arbiter of truth. DNA profiling did not merely correct a miscarriage of justice by freeing wrongfully accused men. It exposed the fundamental fragility of a case built on pressure rather than proof, establishing a permanent precedent for the necessity of preserving biological evidence and embracing technological innovation as it evolves. At the center of the ongoing, modern phase of the investigation lies the silent, patient vigilance of the federal DNA database system. The unique YSDR genetic profile recovered from the physical evidence of the crime scene remains logged within CODIS, functioning as a microscopic sentinel that never sleeps, never tires, and never forgets. Every time a new arrest is made anywhere in the nation, every time an individual enters the criminal justice system, and every time biological records are updated or expanded, that digital placeholder runs its quiet comparisons, searching across millions of profiles for a match that could finally bridge the decades-long chasm between the crime and its perpetrator. Furthermore, the rapid advancements in investigative genetic genealogy, a revolutionary discipline that combines DNA profiling with extensive historical family tree research, offer a glimmer of hope that the anonymous profile might eventually be traced through distant relatives, pointing detectives toward a familial lineage that has thus far eluded detection. This technological horizon represents the primary avenue through which cold cases of this magnitude are increasingly being solved, turning microscopic whispers of genetic material into roadmaps for modern investigators who refuse to let the trail go cold. The city of Austin itself has undergone a breathtaking metamorphosis since 1991, evolving from a sprawling, unpretentious Texas city into one of the most dynamic, technologically advanced, and densely populated metropolitan centers in the United States. The physical landscape of North Lamar Boulevard has been reshaped by modern real estate development, new storefronts, and the relentless march of urban expansion, rendering much of the physical environment of that fateful winter night almost unrecognizable to those who knew it decades ago. Yet, beneath the gleaming facade of this modern boomtown, the cultural and historical scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the civic consciousness. Veteran law enforcement officers who walked through that ash-choked room on the night of the fire have retired. A new generation of detectives has assumed command of the cold case division, and the collective memory of the city has been passed down through generations as a cautionary tale of innocence lost. The case is a permanent reminder that no matter how fast a city grows or how modern its infrastructure becomes, the past cannot simply be paved over. It demands to be resolved with truth and integrity. The enduring tragedy of the Austin yogurt shop murders stands as a profound testament to the limits of human institutions when confronted with the darkest extremes of human malice, balanced against the unyielding resilience of the scientific method and the human spirit. It is a narrative that spans decades, weaving together the mundane routines of teenage life, the terrifying mechanics of sudden violence, the agonizing flaws of the justice room, and the silent, patient promise of modern genetics. The four young girls whose lives were extinguished on December 6, 1991, Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers, deserve a final resolution that matches the gravity of their loss. Until the day arrives when that anonymous genetic profile finally triggers a match in the federal database, and the true monsters who orchestrated the massacre are dragged into the light of a courtroom. The shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas. It remains an open wound in the state's history, a perpetual challenge to the pursuit of absolute justice, and a solemn, unchanging vow that the truth, no matter how deeply buried beneath the ash of time and deception, will ultimately find a way to speak. The architecture of an unresolved criminal investigation is built upon a foundation of endless patience and the quiet, persistent ticking of time that refuses to let the past remain buried beneath the surface of modern progress. When a case as devastating as the Austin yogurt shop murder stretches across multiple decades, it ceases to be merely a localized file in a police cabinet and transforms into a permanent fixture of collective cultural memory, a dark mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of human institutions and the unrelenting demand for accountability. The passage of 30 years and more does not diminish the gravity of what occurred on that freezing December night in 1991. Instead, it sharpens the contours of the tragedy, highlighting the profound gap between the chaotic cruelty of the crime and the methodical, often agonizingly slow pace of justice. In the landscape of American true crime history, few cases occupy a position as universally haunting or as instructive regarding the perils of investigative shortcuts, the fragility of legal frameworks under public pressure, and the ultimate, unyielding authority of modern science. To comprehend the full magnitude of this enduring mystery, one must continually return to the fundamental reality of the lives that were extinguished inside that small, pastel-colored establishment on North Lamar Boulevard. The narrative of the yogurt shop murders is frequently analyzed through the lenses of forensic science, legal procedure, and investigative error, yet its true core remains anchored in the human dimension of absolute loss. Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers were not statistical abstractions or passive characters in a fictional drama. They were daughters, sisters, friends, and young people standing at the threshold of life with futures full of unwritten potential. Their arbitrary selection as targets by individuals driven by unfathomable malice serves as a sobering reminder of the random cruelty that can occasionally puncture the ordinary routines of civilized society. The fact that their names and faces continue to resonate through the decades is a testament to the moral obligation carried by investigators, journalists, and the community at large to ensure that their memories are never eclipsed by the passage of time or the bureaucratic inertia of an unsolved file. The institutional legacy of the case within the Texas law enforcement community is one of profound transformation, born out of the painful lessons learned from the missteps of the past. The reliance on marathon, high-pressure interrogations that produced coerced confessions from vulnerable young men in the late 1990s stands as a cautionary tale studied by legal scholars and police academies across the nation. It exposed a dangerous institutional vulnerability where the immense psychological weight of public expectation and media anxiety could distort the objective pursuit of truth, leading investigators down a perilous path of confirmation bias and tunnel vision. The subsequent overturning of those convictions and the absolute exoneration delivered by advanced YSDR DNA profiling in 2009 marked a watershed moment in the understanding of how criminal justice systems must operate. It proved unequivocally that confessions obtained under duress are a dangerous illusion, and that true accountability can only be anchored in rigorous, uncompromised physical and biological evidence. The case forced a critical reevaluation of evidence preservation protocols, ensuring that biological materials from historical crimes are safeguarded with meticulous care, anticipating the day when technological advancements might finally unlock their secrets. Looking toward the horizon of forensic science, the investigation into the yogurt shop murders remains intimately tied to the rapid evolution of genetic genealogy and analytical database matching. The anonymous male DNA profile recovered from the crime scene, which stubbornly refuses to align with any individual currently cataloged in the federal CODIS database, represents both a frustrating barrier and a persistent beacon of hope. As investigative genetic genealogy continues to revolutionize the resolution of decades-old cold cases across the country, combining familial DNA mapping with exhaustive historical records, the methodology for hunting anonymous perpetrators has expanded exponentially. Cold case investigators are no longer entirely dependent on a direct, identical match within existing law enforcement databases. They can now peer down the genealogical branches of a family tree, tracing genetic lineages to identify individuals who share common ancestors with the unknown source of the biological material. This technological frontier offers a tangible pathway forward, transforming microscopic traces of genetic material into actionable intelligence that can breathe new life into investigations that had long appeared terminally stalled. The city of Austin itself serves as a striking backdrop to this ongoing quest for truth, having undergone a breathtaking transformation over the past 3 decades. The quiet, unassuming regional city of the early 1990s has evolved into a sprawling, hypermodern metropolitan center, characterized by towering skyscrapers, rapid technological innovation, and a massive influx of new residents from all corners of the globe. The physical markers of the past have largely been swept away by the relentless tide of urban development, replacing familiar local landmarks with modern commercial spaces and altered streetscapes. Yet, despite this dizzying modernization, the cultural and historical scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply etched into the civic consciousness of the community. It stands as a reminder that no amount of economic growth, technological sophistication, or demographic change can simply pave over an unresolved tragedy of this magnitude. The past demands resolution, and the city continues to carry the weight of that unfinished chapter as a quiet, persistent reminder of its vulnerability. The emotional and psychological toll borne by the families of the victims over these many decades is a testament to an endurance that defies ordinary comprehension. For the parents, siblings, and loved ones who survived Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy, grief has not followed a neat, predictable trajectory toward closure. Instead, it has become an integrated part of their daily existence, shaped by the enduring absence of definitive answers. They have navigated the cruel roller coaster of false hope, legal battles, overturned convictions, and scientific revelations with a remarkable steadfastness, serving as the moral compass of the ongoing search for justice. Their refusal to let the case fade into obscurity ensures that the victims remain vivid, human presences rather than distant historical footnotes. In their quiet dignity and persistent advocacy, they embody the truest definition of resilience, standing as a constant, gentle pressure on the conscience of the judicial system to keep searching until the full truth is finally brought to light. As the years continue to accumulate and the investigation stretches further into the 21st century, the Austin yogurt shop murders retain their dark distinction as one of the most enigmatic and deeply affecting crimes in the history of the American Southwest. It is a narrative that encompasses the entire spectrum of human experience, from the innocent joys of youth and the ordinary comfort of community routines to the terrifying extremes of predatory violence and the systemic failures of legal institutions under pressure. Yet, beneath the layers of tragedy, bureaucratic missteps, and scientific complexity, the case remains defined by its fundamental incompleteness. The silent, waiting profile in the federal database, the persistent dedication of cold case detectives, the unwavering vigilance of the victims' families, and the steady march of forensic innovation all converge on a single, inescapable point. The truth of what happened on that freezing December night is locked away in the microscopic details of the evidence, waiting patiently for the day when technology, persistence, and perhaps a measure of fortune finally align to break the silence. Until that day arrives, the shadow cast by North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas, an unyielding challenge to the pursuit of absolute justice and a solemn, unchanging vow that the voices of the 4 young girls will never be forgotten in the long, dark night of history. The final measure of a true crime narrative is not found in the sudden resolution of a court verdict or the dramatic flash of a courtroom gavel, but rather in the quiet, enduring space that remains long after the microphones have been switched off. When we trace the trajectory of the Austin yogurt shop murders from that freezing December night in 1991 through the labyrinth of compromised evidence, marathon interrogations, false confessions, legal vindications, and the modern revelations of advanced genetic profiling, we are left standing before a monument of human endurance and institutional reckoning. The story of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers transcends the standard boundaries of a local police file, evolving into a profound examination of how society confronts its deepest collective traumas. It is a narrative that challenges our assumptions about the infallibility of justice, exposes the fragile nature of memory and coercion under duress, and highlights the quiet, unyielding power of science to cut through decades of deception and error. To fully appreciate the weight of this case is to understand that justice is not merely an event that occurs within the walls of a courtroom. It is an ongoing, sacred obligation to remember, to question, and to refuse to let the darkness have the final word. Throughout this extensive exploration, we have confronted the chilling reality of how quickly ordinary life can be violently upended by forces beyond comprehension. The pastel-colored walls, the bright fluorescent lights, and the sweet aroma of frozen treats that once defined a safe sanctuary for teenagers on North Lamar Boulevard were transformed in a matter of moments into a sight of unimaginable horror. Yet, the true tragedy of that night extends far beyond the physical brutality of the crime scene. It lies in the systematic disruption of 4 young lives that were only just beginning to unfold. Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy represented the vibrant promise of a community anchored in family, friendship, and youthful ambition. Their collective presence in the store was not an act of recklessness, but an expression of normal, everyday normalcy. The fact that their futures were abruptly stolen by anonymous predators who slipped away into the smoke and the shadows remains an open wound in the civic consciousness of Texas, a perpetual reminder of how vulnerable our safest spaces truly are when confronted with the darkest extremes of human malice. The investigative journey that followed that fateful night serves as a sobering masterclass in the pitfalls and perils of high-stakes detective work under extreme public pressure. We have witnessed how the combination of a compromised crime scene, media anxiety, and the desperate yearning for closure can push an institution down dangerous pathways of confirmation bias and tunnel vision. The reliance on coercive interrogation tactics that extracted false confessions from vulnerable young men in the late 1990s stands as a dark chapter in the history of the local justice system, demonstrating how easily the human mind under psychological torment can fracture and adopt narratives dictated by interrogators. The subsequent overturning of those convictions and the absolute exoneration delivered by YSDR DNA profiling in 2009 marked a monumental turning point, proving that truth cannot be manufactured through pressure or forged in the crucible of fear. It established an immutable precedent for the necessity of rigorous, uncompromised physical evidence and the vital importance of preserving biological materials so that future generations of scientists can read the stories that earlier technology was simply not advanced enough to decipher. In the contemporary landscape of the investigation, the anonymous male genetic profile resting silently within the federal CODIS database functions as a microscopic sentinel of hope and accountability. It is a silent reminder that science does not forget, that biological evidence retains its integrity across decades, and that the technological horizon is constantly expanding to offer new pathways toward resolution. Through the revolutionary advancements of investigative genetic genealogy, which combines familial DNA mapping with extensive historical research, cold case detectives now possess tools that their predecessors in the 1990s could only have imagined in science fiction. This convergence of modern genetics and relentless police persistence ensures that the trail has not gone cold, even as the calendar pages continue to turn. The unknown perpetrator may have eluded justice for more than 30 years, shielded by the passage of time and the limitations of past methodologies, but they are running out of places to hide in a world where genetic footprints are increasingly difficult to erase. The city of Austin itself has mirrored the evolution of the case, transforming from a sprawling, unpretentious regional hub into a hypermodern metropolitan epicenter of global innovation and massive demographic expansion. The physical geography of North Lamar Boulevard has been rewritten by real estate development and modern infrastructure, replacing the landmarks of 1991 with the sleek architectures of the 21st century. Yet, this dizzying modernization has not erased the historical memory of the community. The cultural scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the identity of the city, carried forward by veteran investigators who remember the ash-choked room, by the new generation of detectives dedicated to keeping the file active, and above all, by the surviving family members who have maintained their dignified, unyielding vigil for more than 3 decades. Their resilience in the face of unspeakable grief and institutional disappointment is the moral compass of the entire narrative, ensuring that the victims are never reduced to archival statistics, but are honored as beloved daughters, sisters, and friends whose lights were extinguished far too soon. When we reflect upon the sheer magnitude of this historical cold case, we are forced to confront the fundamental limitations of human institutions when pitted against the profound mysteries of violence and time. The Austin yogurt shop murders stand as a complex mosaic of ordinary teenage life, extraordinary tragedy, systemic failure, and scientific redemption. It is a story that demands our attention, not merely because of its gruesome details or its sensational legal twists, but because it serves as a mirror reflecting our shared vulnerability and our collective responsibility to seek the truth, no matter how long the road may be. The pursuit of justice for Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy is a journey that remains unfinished, suspended in the quiet tension between an anonymous genetic profile and the eventual dawn of accountability. Until the day arrives when that digital placeholder finally triggers a match, and the true architects of the massacre are dragged into the harsh light of a courtroom to answer for their crimes, the shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas. It remains an enduring challenge to the conscience of the legal system, a solemn testament to the unyielding power of memory, and an unbreakable vow that the voices of the 4 young girls will echo through history until the absolute truth is finally brought to light. The journey through the labyrinth of the Austin yogurt shop murders ultimately brings us to a profound and sobering realization about the nature of unresolved history and the enduring weight of collective memory. When a tragedy of this magnitude occurs, leaving an indelible scar upon the cultural landscape of a vibrant city, the pursuit of truth becomes far more than a mere legal obligation. It transforms into an ethical imperative that defies the convenient boundaries of time, bureaucracy, and institutional closure. Over the course of more than 3 decades, the narrative of December 6, 1991, has evolved from a local news report into a sprawling, multi-layered examination of human vulnerability, systemic failure, and the relentless evolution of forensic science. It is a story that refuses to be neatly filed away or forgotten, echoing through the corridors of the justice system as a perpetual reminder of the fragility of safety and the absolute necessity of rigorous, uncompromised integrity when confronting the darkest extremes of human behavior. Throughout this extensive exploration, we have been forced to confront the stark contrast between the ordinary, unpretentious beauty of youth and the calculated, predatory brutality that shattered it with absolute finality. The 4 young girls whose lives were extinguished in that small, pastel-colored back room on North Lamar Boulevard. Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers were not abstract symbols or distant historical figures existing merely in police records. They were real human beings standing at the threshold of their lives, bound together by the innocent routines of friendship, family responsibility, and teenage employment. Their presence in the shop on that fateful Friday night was an expression of normalcy, a reflection of a time when the world felt secure, structured, and predictable. The fact that their futures were violently stolen by anonymous perpetrators who left behind only ash, smoke, and silent psychological devastation remains an open, bleeding wound in the civic identity of Texas, a haunting testament to how quickly the sanctuary of everyday life can be breached by malice. The investigative path that followed that dreadful night serves as a sobering masterclass in the perils of high-stakes detective work driven by public panic and institutional desperation. We have witnessed how a compromised crime scene, combined with the immense psychological pressure to deliver quick answers to a terrified populace, can lead investigators down dangerous pathways of confirmation bias and tunnel vision. The reliance on marathon, coercive interrogations that extracted false confessions from vulnerable young men in the late 1990s stands as a dark chapter in the history of the local justice system. It demonstrated with terrifying clarity how easily the human mind under extreme psychological duress can fracture, adopting and regurgitating narratives fed by interrogators simply to escape immediate torment. The subsequent overturning of those convictions and the absolute exoneration delivered by advanced YSTR DNA profiling in 2009 marked a monumental turning point, proving once and for all that justice cannot be manufactured through pressure or forged in the crucible of fear. That seismic scientific revelation fundamentally altered the trajectory of the case, stripping away the fragile illusion of closure and dragging the investigation right back to its harrowing starting point. It established an immutable precedent for the necessity of rigorous, uncompromised physical evidence and the vital importance of preserving biological materials so that future generations of scientists can read stories that earlier technology was simply not advanced enough to decipher. In the contemporary landscape of the cold case division, that anonymous male genetic profile resting silently within the federal CODIS database functions as a microscopic sentinel of hope and accountability. It is a silent reminder that biology does not forget, that physical evidence retains its integrity across decades, and that the technological horizon is constantly expanding to offer new pathways toward resolution. Through the revolutionary advancements of investigative genetic genealogy, which combines familial DNA mapping with extensive historical research, cold case detectives now possess tools that their predecessors could only have imagined in fiction. The city of Austin itself has mirrored the profound evolution of the case, transforming from a sprawling, unpretentious regional hub into a hypermodern metropolitan epicenter of global innovation and massive demographic expansion. The physical geography of North Lamar Boulevard has been rewritten by real estate development and modern infrastructure, replacing the landmarks of 1991 with the sleek architectures of the 21st century. Yet, this dizzying modernization has not erased the historical memory of the community. The cultural scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the identity of the city, carried forward by veteran investigators who remember the ash-choked room, by the new generation of detectives dedicated to keeping the file active, and above all, by the surviving family members who have maintained their dignified, unyielding vigil for more than 3 decades through every trial, legal setback, and emotional disappointment. The resilience displayed by the families of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy in the face of unspeakable grief and institutional disillusionment is the true moral compass of this entire narrative. They have navigated the cruel roller coaster of false hope, legal battles, overturned convictions, and scientific revelations with a remarkable steadfastness that defies ordinary comprehension. Their refusal to let the case fade into obscurity ensures that the victims are never reduced to archival statistics, but are honored as beloved daughters, sisters, and friends whose lights were extinguished far too soon. In their quiet dignity and persistent advocacy, they embody the truest definition of endurance, standing as a constant, gentle pressure on the conscience of the judicial system to keep searching until the full truth is finally brought to light. Their ongoing presence reminds us that behind every cold case file lies a circle of grieving loved ones whose lives were forever altered and whose need for resolution remains absolute and unyielding. When we reflect upon the sheer magnitude of this historical cold case, we are forced to confront the fundamental limitations of human institutions when pitted against the profound mysteries of violence and time. The Austin yogurt shop murders stand as a complex mosaic of ordinary teenage life, extraordinary tragedy, systemic failure, and scientific redemption. It is a story that demands our attention, not merely because of its gruesome details or its sensational legal twists, but because it serves as a mirror reflecting our shared vulnerability and our collective responsibility to seek the truth, no matter how long the road may be. The pursuit of justice for Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy is a journey that remains unfinished, suspended in the quiet tension between an anonymous genetic profile and the eventual dawn of accountability. Until the day arrives when that digital placeholder finally triggers a match, and the true architects of the massacre are dragged into the harsh light of a courtroom to answer for their crimes, the shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas. It remains an enduring challenge to the conscience of the legal system, a solemn testament to the unyielding power of memory, and an unbreakable vow that the voices of the 4 young girls will echo through history until the absolute truth is finally brought to light. The passage of time cannot erode the fundamental need for justice, nor can modern progress pave over the deep historical obligations we owe to those who have suffered unimaginable loss. As the radio fades and the silence returns, we are left to ponder the heavy quietude of an unsolved mystery, knowing that somewhere out there in the vast digital expanse of databases and family trees, the microscopic thread of truth is waiting to be pulled. The story of the Austin yogurt shop murders is a profound reminder that history is never truly dead, and that as long as dedicated individuals refuse to look away, the possibility of redemption remains alive in the dark, quiet spaces where the past refuses to let go. The architecture of an open investigation stretching across decades is forged from a unique alloy of frustration, patience, and the unyielding refusal of the human spirit to let the past dissolve into oblivion. When we stand at the culmination of this exhaustive journey through the labyrinth of the Austin yogurt shop murders, we are reminded that true crime narratives of this magnitude do not wrap themselves up in neat, comfortable conclusions. Instead, they leave us suspended in a profound and lingering silence, a quiet space where the gravity of what happened on that freezing December night in 1991 continues to resonate with undiminished force. The story of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers is not merely a chronicle of violence and institutional failure. It is a permanent testament to the enduring quest for accountability in a world that often seeks comfort in convenient illusions rather than difficult truths. As the years accumulate and the case pushes further into the 21st century, its lessons continue to cast a long, analytical shadow over how we understand justice, forensic science, and the fragile mechanisms of the legal system when confronted with the darkest extremes of human malice. To retrace the winding path of this investigation is to witness the dangerous cost of institutional impatience and the catastrophic hazards of yielding to public pressure when the answers are buried beneath layers of trauma and deceit. The missteps of the late 1990s, characterized by marathon interrogations and the extraction of coerced confessions from vulnerable young men, stand as a permanent warning sign for investigators everywhere. They demonstrate how easily the pursuit of objective truth can be derailed when the overwhelming desire for closure eclipses the rigorous demands of physical evidence and constitutional protection. The subsequent exonerations driven by advanced YSDR DNA profiling in 2009 did not merely correct a historic miscarriage of justice by freeing Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. They fundamentally reshaped our understanding of evidentiary integrity. They proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that confessions forced through psychological duress are a dangerous illusion, and that real accountability can only ever be anchored in the unyielding, immutable voice of science. The case established an unbreakable precedent for the meticulous preservation of biological materials, ensuring that future generations of scientists are given the tools to interrogate the silence of the past. Yet, the scientific redemption that freed the wrongfully accused also stripped away the fragile illusion of finality, dragging the city of Austin and the investigative teams right back to the horrific starting point of the massacre. The anonymous male genetic profile, resting silently within the federal CODIS database, became a microscopic sentinel, a digital placeholder waiting patiently for a match that could bridge the chasm of decades. In the modern era of criminal investigation, that waiting period is no longer defined by passive despair, thanks to the revolutionary emergence of investigative genetic genealogy. By combining advanced familial DNA mapping with exhaustive historical records and genealogical databases, modern cold case detectives possess unprecedented tools to hunt for perpetrators who thought they had successfully erased their tracks. This technological frontier represents the most promising avenue for breaking the decades-long deadlock, offering a tangible mechanism to transform microscopic traces of genetic material into actionable intelligence. It reminds us that the technological horizon is constantly expanding, steadily closing the distance between anonymity and accountability, and ensuring that no killer can assume they are entirely beyond the reach of science. The city of Austin itself has served as a dynamic, ever-changing backdrop to this protracted tragedy, evolving from a sprawling regional hub into a hypermodern metropolitan center of global innovation and massive demographic growth. The physical geography of North Lamar Boulevard has been rewritten by real estate development and modern infrastructure, replacing the familiar commercial landmarks of 1991 with sleek contemporary architectures. Yet, this dizzying modernization has not succeeded in paving over the historical memory of the community. The cultural scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the civic identity, carried forward by veteran investigators who walked through that ash-choked room, by the new generation of detectives dedicated to keeping the file active, and above all, by the surviving family members who have maintained their dignified, unyielding vigil for more than 3 decades. Their unwavering resilience in the face of unspeakable grief and repeated institutional disappointment stands as the true moral compass of the narrative, ensuring that the victims are never reduced to archival statistics or forgotten footnotes in the long history of crime. The endurance demonstrated by the parents, siblings, and loved ones of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy defies ordinary comprehension, embodying a quiet dignity that serves as an enduring reproach to the failures of the past. They have navigated the cruel roller coaster of false hope, legal battles, overturned convictions, and scientific revelations with a remarkable steadfastness, maintaining a constant, gentle pressure on the conscience of the judicial system to keep searching until the full truth is brought to light. Their ongoing presence reminds us that behind every cold case file lies a circle of grieving individuals whose lives were permanently fractured and whose need for resolution remains absolute and unyielding. They have ensured that Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy remain vivid, human presences in our collective consciousness, remembered not for the terrifying manner of their deaths, but for the vibrant promise of their youth, their deep familial bonds, and the bright futures that were stolen from them on a cold winter night. When we reflect upon the sheer magnitude of this historical cold case, we are forced to confront the fundamental limitations of human institutions when pitted against the profound mysteries of violence and time. The Austin yogurt shop murders stand as a complex mosaic of ordinary teenage life, extraordinary tragedy, systemic failure, and scientific redemption. It is a story that demands our attention, not merely because of its gruesome details or its sensational legal twists, but because it serves as a mirror reflecting our shared vulnerability and our collective responsibility to seek the truth, no matter how long the road may be. The pursuit of justice for Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy is a journey that remains unfinished, suspended in the quiet tension between an anonymous genetic profile and the eventual dawn of accountability. Until the day arrives when that digital placeholder finally triggers a match, and the true architects of the massacre are dragged into the harsh light of a courtroom to answer for their crimes, the shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas. It remains an enduring challenge to the conscience of the legal system, a solemn testament to the unyielding power of memory, and an unbreakable vow that the voices of the 4 young girls will echo through history until the absolute truth is finally brought to light. The passage of time cannot erode the fundamental need for justice, nor can modern progress pave over the deep historical obligations we owe to those who have suffered unimaginable loss. As we bring this deep exploration to a close, we are left to ponder the heavy quietude of an unsolved mystery, knowing that somewhere out there in the vast digital expanse of databases and family trees, the microscopic thread of truth is waiting to be pulled. The story of the Austin yogurt shop murders is a profound reminder that history is never truly dead, and that as long as dedicated individuals refuse to look away, the possibility of redemption remains alive in the dark, quiet spaces where the past refuses to let go. Every single day that passes without a definitive resolution is a stark reminder of the work that still lies ahead for investigators, forensic scientists, and advocates who refuse to surrender to despair. The final echo of this narrative is not one of finality, but of eternal vigilance, a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing human commitment that transcends the boundaries of ordinary time and institutional exhaustion. The path from that devastating December night in 1991 through the maze of false confessions, legal battles, scientific breakthroughs, and modern genetic genealogy has been long, winding, and fraught with pain. Yet, it has also illuminated the remarkable resilience of a community and the families who refuse to let the darkness claim the final word. In the quiet moments after the microphones are switched off and the archival files are returned to their secure cabinets, the memory of Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers remains a guiding light, urging us forward through the shadows of uncertainty. Until the anonymous profile finds its matching human face, until the true perpetrators are unmasked and brought before the bar of justice, and until the full story of what happened on North Lamar Boulevard is finally written in the ink of absolute truth, we will continue to listen, to remember, and to wait for the dawn of a resolution that has been too long delayed. The search for truth is a sacred trust, one that we carry forward together into the quiet night, knowing that the past will eventually speak its name when the time is right, and that the voices of the innocent will never be truly silenced as long as there are those willing to listen, to care, and to demand that justice is ultimately served with absolute fidelity. Every single thread of evidence, every lingering question, and every quiet prayer from the families reminds us that the quest for accountability is the defining measure of our humanity. The architecture of time in a cold case of this magnitude is a curious and relentless construct, one that stretches across decades while keeping its core mysteries securely locked away behind microscopic barriers. When we examine the legacy of the Austin yogurt shop murders from the vantage point of the modern era, we are forced to confront the reality that history is not merely a collection of dates and archived files, but an active, breathing responsibility that demands our continuous attention and unwavering commitment. The passage of more than 30 years since that freezing December night in 1991 has transformed the landscape of the city, altered the physical environment of North Lamar Boulevard, and shifted generations of law enforcement personnel. Yet the fundamental questions at the heart of the tragedy remain stubbornly unanswered. This enduring uncertainty is not a sign of indifference or professional failure on the part of those who currently hold the case files. Rather, it is a stark reflection of the immense difficulties inherent in untangling a crime where the initial physical evidence was catastrophically compromised by fire and water, and where subsequent investigations were tragically derailed by coercion and tunnel vision. To truly understand why this case continues to haunt the collective conscience of Texas and the wider true crime community, one must look beyond the forensic complexities and the legal battles to the fundamental human element that anchors the entire narrative from beginning to end. Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Sarah Thomas, and Amy Ayers are not historical footnotes or abstract entities confined to cold police reports. They were vibrant young lives defined by warmth, ambition, deep family bonds, and the innocent routines of everyday adolescence. Their presence in the yogurt shop on that fatal evening was an expression of normalcy, a routine interlude in a world they had every reason to trust implicitly. The suddenness with which their futures were obliterated by anonymous predators serves as a permanent, chilling reminder of the fragility of safety and the arbitrary cruelty that can pierce the ordinary boundaries of daily life. The fact that their families have maintained an unwavering, dignified vigil through decades of false hopes, overturned convictions, and scientific revelations is a testament to an endurance that elevates this narrative far beyond standard reporting. They have ensured that the victims remain vivid, human presences, reminding everyone touched by the case that true justice requires us to look past bureaucratic convenience. The institutional lessons forged from the tragic missteps of the late 1990s continue to serve as a critical warning for modern criminal justice systems across the entire nation. The reliance on marathon interrogations, intense psychological pressure, and the extraction of coerced confessions from vulnerable young men demonstrated how easily an investigative body can be blinded by the desperate desire for public closure and media appeasement. The subsequent unraveling of those convictions through advanced YSDR DNA profiling in 2009 marked a monumental turning point, establishing an immutable precedent that confessions extracted under duress are a dangerous illusion, and that true accountability must always rest upon the unshakable foundation of physical and biological evidence. This hard-earned realization transformed protocols across the state and the nation, reinforcing the vital importance of preserving biological materials so that future technological breakthroughs can be applied to historical crimes. The anonymous male genetic profile resting silently within the federal CODIS database is a direct product of this ongoing evolution, serving as a microscopic sentinel that bridges the gap between past limitations and future possibilities, waiting for the exact moment when technology and persistence finally align to reveal the truth. as investigative genetic genealogy continues to rewrite the rules of cold case resolution, combining familial DNA mapping with exhaustive historical records. New avenues of hope have emerged for cases that once appeared terminally stalled. Investigators no longer rely solely on direct, identical hits within existing law enforcement databases. They can trace genetic branches, identify common ancestors, and map family lineages to narrow down the identities of unknown perpetrators with unprecedented precision. This technological frontier represents the most promising mechanism for breaking the decades-long deadlock surrounding the yogurt shop murders, offering a tangible bridge from microscopic genetic material to actionable police intelligence that can guide detectives forward. It embodies the steady, unyielding march of science, a relentless force that steadily shrinks the hiding spaces available to those who commit acts of horrific violence against the innocent. While the passage of time introduces new challenges, such as the aging or passing of potential witnesses and secondary sources, the integrity of properly preserved biological evidence remains a powerful equalizer that time alone cannot erode or diminish, keeping the pursuit of accountability alive through every single year that passes in silence. The city of Austin itself serves as a profound backdrop to this ongoing quest, having transformed from a sprawling regional hub into a hypermodern metropolitan epicenter of global innovation, technology, and rapid demographic expansion. The physical geography of North Lamar Boulevard has been rewritten by modern real estate development, new storefronts, and contemporary infrastructure, replacing the familiar commercial landmarks of 1991 with the sleek architectures of the 21st century. Yet, this dizzying modernization has not succeeded in paving over the historical memory of the community or the deep scars left behind by the tragedy. The cultural scar of the yogurt shop massacre remains deeply embedded in the civic identity, carried forward by veteran investigators who walked through that ash-choked room, by the new generation of detectives dedicated to keeping the file active, and above all, by the surviving family members who have maintained their dignified, unyielding vigil through every trial, legal setback, and emotional disappointment. Their resilience stands as a constant reminder that no amount of economic growth or urban renewal can erase an unresolved tragedy of this magnitude from the collective memory of the state. When we reflect upon the sheer magnitude of this historical cold case, we are forced to confront the fundamental limitations of human institutions when pitted against the profound mysteries of violence and time. The Austin yogurt shop murders stand as a complex mosaic of ordinary teenage life, extraordinary tragedy, systemic failure, and scientific redemption. It is a story that demands our attention, not merely because of its gruesome details or its sensational legal twists, but because it serves as a mirror reflecting our shared vulnerability and our collective responsibility to seek the truth, no matter how long the road may be. The pursuit of justice for Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy is a journey that remains unfinished, suspended in the quiet tension between an anonymous genetic profile and the eventual dawn of accountability. Until the day arrives when that digital placeholder finally triggers a match, and the true architects of the massacre are dragged into the harsh light of a courtroom to answer for their crimes. The shadow of North Lamar Boulevard will continue to stretch across the landscape of Texas, an unyielding reminder of the work that remains undone in the search for absolute truth. It remains an enduring challenge to the conscience of the legal system, a solemn testament to the unyielding power of memory, and an unbreakable vow that the voices of the four young girls will echo through history until the absolute truth is finally brought to light. The passage of time cannot erode the fundamental need for justice, nor can modern progress pave over the deep historical obligations we owe to those who have suffered unimaginable loss. As we navigate the heavy quietude of an unsolved mystery, we know that somewhere out there in the vast digital expanse of databases and family trees, the microscopic thread of truth is waiting to be pulled by a vigilant hand. The story of the Austin yogurt shop murders is a profound reminder that history is never truly dead, and that as long as dedicated individuals refuse to look away, the possibility of redemption remains alive in the dark, quiet spaces where the past refuses to let go. Every single day that passes without a definitive resolution is a stark reminder of the work that still lies ahead for investigators, forensic scientists, and advocates who refuse to surrender to despair. The final echo of this narrative is not one of finality, but of eternal vigilance, a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing human commitment that transcends ordinary time and institutional exhaustion. The path from that devastating December night through the maze of false confessions, legal battles, scientific breakthroughs, and modern genetic genealogy has been long and fraught with pain. Yet, it has also illuminated the remarkable resilience of a community and the families who refuse to let darkness claim the final word. In the quiet moments after archival files are returned to secure cabinets, the memory of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy remains a guiding light urging us forward through uncertainty. Until the anonymous profile finds its matching human face, until the true perpetrators are unmasked before the bar of justice, and until the full story of North Lamar Boulevard is written in absolute truth, we will continue to listen, remember, and wait for resolution. The search for truth is a sacred trust, one carried forward into the quiet night, knowing that the past will eventually speak its name when the time is right.